Hey there. This week for the Q&A, I want to talk about self-limiting beliefs. And this is actually a question that has come through Twitter. We've had a lot of really amazing Twitter conversations this past week. And so I've got some great stuff. It's actually inspiring many, I think, future episodes. So it's going to be really great. But for today, the thing that really bubbled to the top was self-limiting beliefs. And so if you don't know me, I'm Marjorie Siegler. I'm a physician. I'm also a social media and career strategist for other physicians. And here I am to talk about self-limiting beliefs, which really came through on a couple of threads, specifically a couple of threads about public speaking and getting paid for professional public speaking, right, outside of the realm of your, sort of standard grand rounds type speaking that many physicians do. And then also on a Women in Medicine's chat where we were talking about kind of going for the ask, like how, what are the challenges, what are the things that go well or don't go well when you are asking for or negotiating for something different at work or potentially at home, I guess really any negotiation situation. And there were a handful of things that kept sort of coming up as a theme. So what I was seeing so often is questions about, how do I do this? Because it just doesn't work that way. That was sort of part one. I kept seeing that a lot, just doesn't work that way. And then, how do I begin to generally negotiate, right? I'm going to fill in the blank because I'm merging a lot of tweets together, but basically, how do I begin to negotiate without, or how do I begin a conversation about money without losing the opportunity that's being presented or sounding greedy or feeling guilty for wanting more? So this is really great. I thought about answering it at face value, but I'm going to do that another day. I will answer the question about how do you start a negotiation conversation, or how do you begin the conversation about money if the party that's asking you to do something has not brought that up. I'll talk about that a different time, but today I wanted to really address self-limiting beliefs, which I think is just speaking so loudly and clearly through this question. So if you don't know what a self-limiting belief is, it's exactly what it sounds like. It's an unhealthy belief that you hold about yourself, and it influences how you behave, your decision-making, and really even how you think about yourself. So a belief and your thoughts are a little bit different. I mean, the thoughts are sort of on the fly, and the belief is more deeply held. It's just a few layers deeper. It's similar to a value. It's kind of underneath, and it's usually pretty well ingrained. And a self-limiting belief, unhealthy and holding you back. They sound like this. When you hear yourself saying, well, I just do blah, 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 or I don't such and such, or I can't such and such, or I just am, or I just am not, whatever it is, those are kind of fixed beliefs, right? That you are or are not a certain way, or you do or you don't know how to do something capably. And then this is how the world works, essentially, types of statements. These are all self-limiting beliefs. They're generally bad, and they usually are linked somehow to self-preservation. And what I mean by that is, of course, it's never on purpose, right? It's always below the surface. But these are usually linked to feeling like you're not capable, or you'll never measure up. You won't be able to do something well enough or good enough or as well as everyone else. And so therefore, why bother putting yourself out there like that? And again, they're underneath. So you'll catch yourself saying those things. And so why I'm asking you right now to be on the lookout for it. When you catch yourself saying, well, I can't do this, or I don't do that, or this is just the way it is, realize that you're articulating a self-limiting belief. And then I want you to do a couple things. This is one of the sessions that we have at the Transformed Conference, and I have to say it is one of the most uncomfortable sessions we have at first. I mean, I can just see people want to just kind of like get up and bail out if they can. But it is so important, and it is also the one in which most people cry, and it's definitely the one in which most people make their biggest breakthroughs at Transform. So I feel like this going to be true for you as well, really wherever you're doing it, as long as you can get deep enough to do the work. So there's two suggestions that I have once you've identified those self-limiting beliefs. So I guess that's part one, right? Identify the self-limiting belief. Be on the lookout for hearing yourself beginning phrases with those particular words, or when you're framing up something that like, this is just how it is, there's nothing I can do. So when you hear that, I want you to isolate that belief, so kind of pull it out and then dig into why you think so. So if you find yourself saying something like, I just can't get comfortable on stage, then you want to kind of dig underneath that and why is that? And at first, it might seem like there's no answer to that, right? Because that's just how you are. But in fact, there is an answer. There is definitely an answer. And the answer usually comes from a handful of things. Either it comes from prior experience, right? Maybe you had an experience in which you felt like you were extremely uncomfortable on stage, and so it was so frightening, or it was so impactful that you've just kind of never moved back from that. Or because you were taught or told something repeatedly, right? So it can be that as well. So either prior experience, something that you've been taught or told, or, and this is one that people don't like to face a lot, but is often the problem, it is something that has helped you in the past, right? I mentioned earlier self-preservation. So a lot of times these self-limiting beliefs are protective in some ways, right? As an example, for a person who feels like, you know, they are not good on the dating scene, right? They don't do well with dating. So they might say, well, I don't do well like that, right? I'm never going to meet a person that I'm going to click with. Well, that's, you know, if that's happy for them, super. But if it's not, and a lot of people are fooling themselves there, you may not be, but I'm thinking of a person in mind who I know this is how our conversation started, and it wasn't actually what she wanted, but she had sort of told herself that she did, and then she would say, well, you know, because I'm not good at that, then this is what I do instead. I come home, you know, I binge watch my shows, I do this, I do this, I do this. But really what she was doing is protecting herself from the difficulty of going out there and doing something that she feels uncomfortable with, the potential for rejection, and all that other stuff. So it was protecting her on some level, but really holding her back from something that she really did want, which was, you know, a meaningful partnership, a meaningful relationship with someone. So, you know, in a romantic sense. So there are these protective barriers. I know it kind of sounds like Dr. Phil, like that's the kind of stuff he says, right? Like, how's this working for you? You know, but it is working for you somehow on some level, usually. So again, you identify the self-limiting belief when you hear yourself saying those phrases, you isolate the belief. And I'm a big fan of really like locking yourself in a closet or somewhere private, probably with a journal, and writing down why it is that you hold that belief. And I know that at first this is extremely hard to do and your mind will be blank. Why do I hold this belief? And what you write down will probably be pretty superficial. It will, you know, it'll just be sort of a memory that you have, or you will remember someone who taught this to you, or you will say something like, well, I just like to watch my shows, or something like that, right? And then I want you to do another layer of why. So you ask yourself why to the explanation to the first question, right? So question, why, answer, well, why? And now you're starting to sound like a 2-year-old. Why, and why? And I want you to do that 5 layers deep, at least. And by the time you get down there, if you've really been, you know, having introspection, really thinking about it, then a lot of times you've come much, much further into understanding sort of the core of what it is that is holding you back. Because if you're sitting there saying, you know, I want to negotiate for myself, or I want to begin a conversation about money, but how do I do it without losing the opportunity? That is coming from a position of scarcity, a position where you feel like if I don't just jump at whatever's offered to me, it's going to run away. I won't even have a chance, or I'm going to sound greedy, like I don't deserve it, or, you know, I'm going to feel guilty for wanting more. And now those may be indeed the underlying beliefs, right? The things that are influencing your behaviors, but also they might be things that someone has told you. They might be things that you think you've experienced in the past. They might be things that you think you ought to feel like am I entitled to feel like I am deserving of more? So we've got to get past the actual how to have that conversation, because that part's easy. I can share that formula with you, like no problem. You got to get past that and start to dig into the why. So identify it, isolate it, and then this is, of course, easier said than done, and it takes practice and it takes time. But what you have to do next, now that you've identified and isolated your self-limiting belief and really taken stock of how it's holding you back, like what is it preventing you from getting that you really do want to get? Once you have that sort of all out on the table, it's much, much easier to move forward. So this is how you can move forward. You basically start to replace your self-limiting belief with an enabling belief. What's an enabling belief? An enabling belief is less fixed. It's more dynamic in such the way that you might say, I can learn. So instead of saying I do or I don't, or I am not, you might say I can try to blah, 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 because you can always try, right? So you could replace the belief of I don't with I can try, or, you know, I can't with I can try. And that is an enabling belief, right? It's not who you are. It's not fixed. It's your behavior really that determines whether or not you can learn certain things. And almost everything is learnable, right? You can unlearn the self-limiting beliefs. You can get yourself into an enabling belief pattern, especially if you have insight here and you're paying attention. The other one is to say, well, it might work. So this is, you know, these sound probably like not rocket science, but it's a simple switch in your mind where instead of saying I am not, or this is how the world works, suddenly now you can think, well, it might work if I approach it this way. And so again, those are just dynamic changes. And then I would tell you to replace that, right? Replace your self-limiting belief. Even though you're doing this, it may feel really robotic and artificial because you're identifying that you're doing it, and you're stopping yourself, and then you're replacing it on purpose with a belief that I realize you don't believe yet, right? But you replace it with this sort of enabling belief thought. And then you do what I've written about before also, which is called acting as if. You just behave as if you believe what I know you don't believe yet, but which is an enabling belief, right? So if you go from the perspective of, you know, this is how the world works, I cannot ask for money. You know, someone's invited me to speak, but they haven't offered me money and I can't bring it up because that's not how it works. Now you can go from the approach of, well, it might work. And then you're just going to begin to behave in a way as if you believe that it might work. And that's when, you know, the script that we're talking about, how to start those conversations, how to have those negotiations. Again, we get deep into that, I guess, in a lot of places, in Transformed, in the speaking prescription, the branding prescription, learning how to have those types of conversations. But when you do that, you kind of crack it open. You basically are practicing, you're sort of sharpening the claws, right? You're practicing behaving in a way as if you believed your enabling belief. And over time, you will find that it gets reinforced because you will have wins. You'll have wins you don't expect. Some will be big, some will be small, but you will start to have some wins. And when you do, you will start to reinforce that enabling belief, and you'll start to kind of distance yourself and break those cognitive links from the self-limiting beliefs. You'll be able to move forward. So again, identify them, isolate them, get down into those 5 layers of why, and then I want you to replace with an enabling belief and then just start living as if. This is really sort of the sequence of events, I think. Then you wouldn't be sending out a tweet that says, how can I ask about, or how can I ask for, or how can I negotiate, how can I step up and advocate for myself without sounding greedy, being guilty, losing the opportunity. So being so afraid really that something is not going to work out in your favor that's holding you back. Perhaps the self-limiting belief is something more along the lines of you have to wait to be offered or to be given permission. This is extraordinarily common in medicine. It's even more common among women in medicine. We really kind of think that our work speaks for itself, and that when we're ready and when we are deserving and when we've paid our dues, someone is going to swoop in and give us, right, what we've always wanted and what we deserve. But, you know, I don't think that's likely to happen. I was about to say that's just not how it works. I might even say it. That's just not how it works, right? People don't do that for you, or they may not do that for you. So I don't think it's a very good strategy to sit and wait and hope for that. Much better is to be proactive, to realize you don't need other people's permission, and to realize that you have power and you have worth, and that when you make your ask, particularly if you learn just some basic principles of how to do that, it's going to be well received. Your relationships are going to be preserved. More than likely, if the other party has the ability to give you part of what it is that you're asking for, you will reach some kind of consensus in that way.